Welcome to the premiere episode of Joe's Place, the Joe Giannotti podcast. Today's guest is a talk show host and longtime sports statistician and stage manager for pro and college sports throughout the New York metropolitan area. He is the host of The Chris Ponte Show, which airs every Wednesday night at 5 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live and re-airs the following Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Channel 23 in Danbury, Connecticut. It is my honor to have as my first guest, Chris Ponte. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the premiere episode of Joe's Place, the Joe Giannotti podcast. And before I begin, I want to thank everyone for following me on social media. I have almost 900 followers now on Twitter. I am very humbled that I have any followers, much less almost 900. And I thank everyone who is watching today. And as I said, I am honored to have as my first guest a gentleman who has had over 200 episodes of the Chris Ponte Show, which airs every Wednesday on Facebook Live, which you can get below on, I posted it on the bio link, which you can see on YouTube and on Facebook. Additionally, it'll re-air on Danbury Channel 23 on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., and let me bring him in. I call him the legend of Danbury, Connecticut. The legend of Danbury, Connecticut, Mr. Chris Ponte. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Joe, I'm doing great, and I definitely want to, first off, thank you for having me on. And second off, I want to tell everybody the wonderful work you've done with your health. You and I have been friends, I guess, over 10 years now. And I've watched your journey, and you're doing a lot of inspirational things with your health. So not only thank you for having me on and having a podcast, but you're someone that we all can learn from.
Thank you so much, Chris. That is, a great honor to hear that. And for those who don't know me and watching the show today, I have lost over 250 pounds now on my journey. I am now down to 218 pounds, which started in July of 2013. I have been a frequent guest on Chris's show, most recently in September, around Labor Day holiday. And Chris, let's go right into talking about the show. 205 episodes. Let me read off some of the guests you've had. You've had on Amanda Grace from the Ark of Grace Ministries. You've had on Dr. Peter Glidden, Angela Box, Darlene Vogel, Kevin Gallagher, Anna Kate, and someone you've had on twice. You've had on Representative from the great state of Utah, Congressional District Number 4, Burgess Owens. Of those people that I have mentioned, or anyone else, not including me, who has been your favorite guest?
Well, to be honest with you, it's someone that you originally didn't mention. It's a woman known as Dr. Jane Ruby, and the reason why I was driven towards her originally 5-6 years ago was that she was a card-carrying member of the NRA, and there was a lot of controversy about who should have a gun and our rights and yada, yada, yada. So I found her on Facebook and had her on. And not only was she very opinionated about our rights to have guns, whatever you feel about that, but she was a Washington insider. And so I think out of all my guests, and she's been on probably between 8 and 10 times in the last 5 years. She's probably my favorite because she has access to something that in other words, I wouldn't have access to, and that's some truths about the government in Washington, D.C.
That's very interesting that you bring up Dr. Ruby, because I had seen the episode where she was on, and she was an outstanding guest. And interesting, you mentioned the NRA, because I know when you spoke to Anna Kate, she had discussed that, for those who don't know who Anna Kate is, she is a former Survivor contestant who is she a born again Christian? I believe. Yes.
Yes. She went from atheist. She went from atheist to Christianity.
And now she's a conservative, outspoken conservative critic and investigative reporter. She did a very nice job during the election of investigating the different facets of the election and the election of 2020. But Burgess Owens, I saw both appearances on. You had him on a couple weeks before the election, and you had him on just after the election. And Burgess is such a humble guy. Did you know Burgess from his sports days? I know Burgess has always been a public figure, even after his retirement.
Okay. Well, I will tell you. Let me tell you, you mentioned the word honorable and humble. There are other adjectives greater than those describe this man. I found him on Facebook. I knew of him. He got me an interview with Wesley Walker because I have sports figures on also. But I found him on Facebook, and he didn't know me from Adam. And he said, "Sure, I'll come on your show." I'd seen him on Hannity of all places. And so all it took was for me to email him, and sight unseen, he came on my show. And right now we're efforting, trying to get him on. Would it be the first time as a congressman onto the show to talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. But like you said, a smart, humble, hardworking guy. Let me tell you something about Burgess Owens, folks. You know him as a Super Bowl champion. Here's a guy that went to the University of Miami, graduated, played football in 4 years with a double major, chemistry and biology.
Nothing to do with politics.
Nothing to do with politics. He came from a military background, and you wonder why he got to where and because he has worked for everything that he has. He's a tremendous work ethic, and to me, he's one of my favorite people on the planet, because he's an African-American guy that asks for responsibility when it comes to behavior, how we act towards one another. And he's just a great person to know still exists on the planet, and he's representing the country in Congress. So yeah, Burgess is a tremendous guy.
And his district was a hard-fought district. That was not an easy win for him.
No, it was not. It was not an easy win for him. But you see, here's the thing. He won honorably. He won fairly. He ran a clean campaign. Okay. Now you have to remember, this was a 2020 election, which, still hasn't seen the last word, as you people who know me know what I'm talking about. But actually, Burgess was able to win it without having to sue, which is more than I can say for a lot of other people in this country. And he's doing an outstanding job for us in Congress. And it is my belief that in 2022 and in 2024, we're going to see more and more people like Burgess Owens running and winning and doing a great job in our government.
Free thinkers. That's what we need. We need free thinkers. We don't need the divisive politics anymore. We need free thinkers that are working for the people.
Well, that represents counterculture. Now, I talked about that on my radio show today, Joe. In the 1960s, the counterculture were known as the hippies. Well, right now, the counterculture of the 60s are running the planet. So people of throwback morals, traditions are now the counterculture. We are the minority trying to get back into mainstream. So you're right. People like Burgess Owens, we have to multiply them so that we can get back to some sanity. I mean, we were on our way. We were on our way to sanity. We were at a point where we were a net exporter of oil. We went from $1.50 to $3.30 now. That's the kind of sanity we need to get back to. And people like Burgess are going to bring us there.
Yes, and you mentioned your radio show. I'm going to promote it. It's on the Truth Be Told radio network. You can get the app on, which I have. You can just download the app on iTunes, and it is created. I believe the creator and the head of Truth Be Told radio network is Kevin Gallagher. Correct?
Correct. Kevin was. Go ahead.
And I want to mention something very interesting about Kevin Gallagher. So I am honored to have you as my first guest. Well, you are also Kevin Gallagher's first guest on his show Time Out when it expanded to 1 hour.
Correct. It was last summer. Summer during the joys of COVID, Kevin had me on. Yeah. And you know what? It's funny. We're kind of cut from the same cloth. That Kevin came first in public access. Kevin came first, and then I got involved. And you're right, he started this new network, which, by the way, currently is heard in 35 different countries. And we've only been on the air for 3 years. So wow. That's the work of one guy, Kevin Gallagher. And he was nice enough to give me a time slot of 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock Eastern. And, and he allows me to talk about anything I want. And, he's a great, hard-working guy, and he's opened a door for me.
That is incredible. And let's transition to that. How did you get involved with public access? You've been on for at least 10 years now.
Correct. Well, back in 1979, a gentleman that started public access was my fifth grade English teacher. His name was Al Broom. And Al was on public access from the middle 70s. I got involved as a high school junior in 1979. And then I got away from it only to come back to be kind of his fill-in on the show. So in order to get on public access, you have to get certified and you have to go through training. So I did. So I would say around 2011, he brought me in to bring his fill-in. And then once he retired and moved to Florida, we just essentially renamed the show to the Chris Ponte Show. So Al Bruin is like the patriarch of the Ponte Show.
That is incredible. And you mentioned, so you're a junior now. You graduated Danbury High School class of 81. On one of your episodes, and I believe this was episode 200, and please, if I'm wrong, I greatly apologize.
No problem.
You had on someone by the name of Gus Edwards.
Yes, he was our football coach who had passed away. And he was a guy that shaped a lot of our lives. He was a high school football coach, but he was a guidance counselor. He touched all of our lives. And I figured after 40 to 50 years spent in our school system doing both, that he had done. He deserved an hour of our time to kind of recollect. So we did a whole hour on Coach Edwards, who was a great guy and a great motivator, and essentially so effective that today's education system probably wouldn't have him. That's how good he was.
I've always been a big believer of never forget your roots.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Joe, is that when I got to the University of Connecticut, there were people that lived on my floor that couldn't stand Christmas break and the summer because they didn't like going back to their hometown. College was an escape for them. For me, I still live in Danbury, Connecticut. I've been here for 53 years. It is a great place to you plant and grow, and in my part stay. And the greatest part of my living here was my high school experience and gathering lifetime friends and being able to talk about on my show when some of the people that I went to school with, right, have done great things. And those are my favorite interviews to do. So it works for two. I love representing Danbury, and I love people who have done great things after they have left. And Coach Edwards was one of those people that was part of all of our lives going back to the 1950s. So it's one of the benefits of staying put. You have a perspective that I think is full and engaging, and there's a lot that I have seen inside of my purview.
That is, I mean, as I talk about humble, I mean, I feel like I'm very much in the same boat where I have been living in Bethpage, New York for 29 years now. And I don't forget my roots. I don't forget the people that are around me. I don't forget where I came from. Even as I, through the years, have worked at so many levels of sports like you have. I mean, you have worked at all levels. You and I really got to know each other at the high school level, but you and I knew each other also at the college level and certainly at the pro level. I mean, you've been a sports statistician and stage manager for the Knicks for many years. And I want you to talk about that. Let's transition into that. You've gotten to know Walt Clyde Frazier. You've gotten to know Mike Breen. Two guys that are well known in the New York sports arena, and in Breen's case, in the national sports arena. Please talk about your experiences through the years at the college and pro sports level in the media business.
Oh, no problem. I'll let you know. It's funny. I started pulling cable for cable television at high school sporting events in the late 80s. And I went from there to doing stats. And on those broadcasts, I ended up being on air. So that's where I kind of cut my teeth. And I worked for many years at the National Hockey League and NHL Productions. But when that job went away in 2004, I went into the freelance world, and I got involved with stage managing at mostly collegiate level. And during that time, I met somebody by the name of Dave Freed, who is the statistician for both the New York Knicks, full-time Mike Breen, and for Gary Cohen, full-time with the New York Mets. And we worked a couple of games in the stats world, and I earned his trust. So he had me fill in for him at a Knick game in 2013. And it just so happened to be the night that they were honoring the 1973 world champion.
Wow.
So, yeah, 40 years. So I'm sitting with Walt Frazier to my right. I have Jerry Lucas, Dean Meminger, and Bill Bradley behind me. And it was like a dream come true to be there. And so that's where the break came. Like, unfortunately, in this world and in this, sports field, you have to kind of know somebody, and you get one opportunity to fill in and do a good job and earn somebody's trust. And thankfully I did. And that was 2013. And now I'm a full-time doing the away radio broadcast with Ed Cohen, who's a fantastic play-by-play guy. And even more of a thrill is to work with Brendan Brown, who was UB Brown's son, a Hall of Fame coach and broadcaster, UB Brown. And it's amazing listening to him. I thought I knew basketball. I've been following it for 51 years. You think you know it until you listen to people who have dedicated their lives to it. And it's like I can go to basketball college every night. I do a game with these guys. And so that's been a great blessing too. And the Knicks have gotten better this year, which makes the job a little bit easier. But that
Sure.
Notwithstanding, the people that I've had an opportunity to work with, whether it's Walt Frazier, Brian Leach, Earl Monroe, players like this, players that I grew up watching. It's been such a tremendous blessing because remember, I'm just a little kid, 10-year-old kid in 1973 from Danbury, Connecticut. And I'm fortunate enough to have these opportunities. So I enjoy everything I do, but it took a little something to get here.
It's interesting you mentioned Hubie's son because he certainly gives a different dynamic to the game. And Ed Cohen, I am surprised Ed Cohen is not a national play-by-play announcer. Ed Cohen is an outstanding play-by-play announcer, and he has been for quite some time now. Yep. We both have gotten a chance to know him for at least 10 years now. And Ed certainly has done an outstanding job calling the Knicks on the radio, and he really is incredible. And I see great things down his path, as well as other guys like Keith Irizarry. Keith Irizarry hosts a show on NBC. It used to be NBC Sports. I forget the name of it now. Of fantasy football. He's been doing it for 5 years now, and he is another one. Just that class of Ed Cohen and Steve Gelbs is another one who is the sideline reporter for the Mets, and Keith, and I'm going to go further. I'm going to go to Ralph Benarchik, who's called Rutgers women's basketball. Ralph does a really nice job on games. The guys that I know, I mean, these are the guys we've dealt with. The Dylan Butlers, the Dylan Butlers and the Max Shortises. I mean, they also do an outstanding job. If you get a chance to listen to any of these guys, they do a very, very nice job. Aside from the guys that you mentioned, and let me go back to Dave Freed, because Dave Freed for a long time has been the top statistician in the New York area, and you can make an argument that he's the number one guy in the whole country. I mean, he's Breen's personal guy. He travels with Breen everywhere. He covers the Mets all season. Yeah,
and you know what? He's a guy again. He taught me something about quality and quantity, and this is what I learned. I've learned with Mike. I've worked with Mike a bunch of times too as a fill-in. And what Mike looks for, and this is something that Dave Freed has always said, anything that you can pick up off a stats machine, he's not interested in. He's interested in trends. He's interested in you adding to the narrative that doesn't or can't be observed by looking at a stat monitor. And that's something that Dave taught me. And he applies that not only in basketball, but in baseball. It's good to know that Jacob deGrom has 9 strikeouts, but how many were looking? How many went down in 3 strikes? What does that mean historically? It's the same thing when you're watching a basketball game. They are they're outscoring their opponents on the fast break, but what are they doing on the glass and on the defensive glass? Where it all starts. So he's a great teacher. So I was able to cut my teeth with a guy like Dave, who by the way, is not someone who is paranoid that you're there trying to take any work from him. I mean, he's very giving of himself. He was a very patient with me, and now I take what Dave taught me. And now I'm fulfilling my dream, working the New York Knicks games. So what Dave gave to me, I will someday give to somebody else.
That's great. And Dave, the amount of work that Dave gets is incredible. The amount, I mean, I know I've been asked in the past on a number of occasions to try to help Dave out. Especially during holiday time. But, unfortunately, it's very difficult being a meteorologist and working full-time in an office. It's very difficult to help out on weekends, especially since I work them, in my office. But, this is where we met, Chris. I mean, this is where we've known each other for over a decade. In the sports media realm that I have now taken a large step back on. And that's why, doing my own projects and my own thing, I've been very, very happy, especially during the pandemic. I think my number one focus, of course, has been my health. My number one focus has just been my health, because at the start of the pandemic, I was 315 pounds. So I'm thinking, wait a second, with a BMI of 52, if I contract COVID, I could have a bad result. Even though I've made so much progress,
I understand.
I could still have a bad result. So now that I've gotten down to 218, my BMI is around 35, 36, and, I could have a much better result if, God forbid, I could ever contract COVID. And, I want to bring up a quote.
Okay.
I want to bring up two quotes. But first one, before we get into the other career, the little known career of Chris Ponte, which is a stand-up comedian, okay? And we'll get into that in a little bit. Right. I want to bring up this quote. I want you to delve into it.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. I've had two lives, 1963 to 78 and 1979 to present, parentheses, God and Christ. I want you to delve into that for the audience.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, in 1978, I was, my family and I were just kind of going through life. And my oldest brother contracted cancer, and he died in December of 1978. So whatever my life was before that died when he passed away. And after his death, my second life was focusing on the things of the kingdom of God, to learn about heaven, to learn about what was in the Bible, to learn about responsibility, to learn about how to be a light in a dark place to the best of my ability. So in a small dose, which began in 1979, to now what I'm doing in broadcasting, we've been building on that narrative. So that's essentially what that quote was all about.
There you go. First off, I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I am. How old was he?
Oh, he was 25. It's just what happened. And so that's what that quote was about. And, when you lose something like that, you do the best you can.
It gives you a very different perspective on life. And
yeah, it was the worst joke. I say it's the worst joke ever played on anyone at any time, because it happened so quickly. So when I was thinking of a quote which represented my life, when I put that on social media, that's really what this is. That's really what the broadcasting part of me is about. Whether it's the Truth Be Told Network or the Chris Ponte Show, okay, it's both, or the Ponte Show. But what am I doing it for? It's to create a narrative of not darkness, of hope.
Yeah.
It's not a commentary on society to bum you out. It's God's answers and God's ways of doing things that you could step back from hearing me and say, okay, he got to the point a little bit, but I feel better at the end of his show than I did at the beginning. So when it comes to broadcasting, that's really the common theme of why I do what I do. And it doesn't have to be all about Bible prophecy. You mentioned Burgess Owens. You listen to Burgess, you feel better about yourself. You mentioned Anna Kate. You mentioned Dr. Jane Ruby. I've had on Kelly Trapuka. I've had on Mike O'Corin. Guys that have done things, that have been kind enough to say, Ponte, I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what Danbury is, but I'll come on. And I appreciate that. And I make them feel appreciated, because they don't have to do this, Joe. And so I talk about the little things that they have done. Like, why do I remember Kelly Tripucka's career at Notre Dame? Want to know why? Because he started as a freshman, and oh, by the way, he honestly matriculated from Notre Dame University with a head coach where you could actually become academically ineligible, and he never missed a game. And the same thing for Michael Corrin playing for Dean Smith. We don't see this in college sports today, Joe.
We don't. And Michael Corrin, for those who don't know who Michael Corrin is, Michael Corrin might be the greatest the greatest basketball player to ever come out of the state of New Jersey.
Yep, and he went to North Carolina, and I mean, like I said, a fantastic player, but even a better guy. And when I have these people on, Joe, I ask them specifically, tell me what your academic responsibilities were. I want to know the truth. They said, Chris, every week the grades were in front of Coach Smith and Coach Phelps. And yes, if you didn't make the grade, you weren't suiting up.
That's it. And that's the way it should be. And the problem is that athletes, I'm talking about the ones that we know are going to go pro to the next level, they don't care.
No, they're one and done, Joe. There was, listen to you. If you
Not even one and done. Not even one and done.
No, it's like 5 months. You get there and first practice October 15th. If you win the national championship, it's April 2nd. You're done after that. They don't even know you're academically ineligible.
You can drop out.
Yeah, you just drop out. You get an agent.
Right.
It wasn't this way for this. And that's why I am glad I am a person of a certain age, because those are the kind of players I want to highlight. I don't want to talk to a guy that spent 20 minutes at University of Kentucky. I don't want to do that.
No.
I want to talk to someone that went to a college who didn't look at their scholarship and say, well, they need to pay me also. No, they went there feeling that they were blessed and they played by the rules. That's who I want to interview.
But even look at the guys that left after a couple of years. The ones who, I'm talking about the ones who are very successful today. They went back and finished their degrees.
Right. Some of them, you're right. If you look at the NFL, you have to stay past your junior year before you're out. Where you go. The NBA is ridiculous, Joe. I'm waiting for the first time they draft a 16-year-old because he can get his working papers. I'm waiting for that day. I mean, it has gotten so ridiculous. There is no academic standard for any of these athletes anymore. And then now they're saying, oh, I want to be paid. $200,000 of scholarship money is not enough. And you're cheating on that.
Right. That's right. And now the NBA has gone back to, I think that they've gone back to essentially the LeBron rule, right? Where they could become pro. Is it 1 year now? Is it still 1 year? Or you could just go right out of high school now again.
Sure. Just like Daryl Dawkins did. To me, that's really, to be honest with you, Joe, if you turn pro out of high school, like Moses Malone and Dawkins, at least you're being intellectually honest. You're not going to a college and taking up dorm space and partying on Thursday night, knowing you could blow off every class, every test, every quiz, every paper, and it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, in baseball, the majority of the baseball players now, that the American baseball players I'm talking about, of course, actually go 4 years in college, and they don't start until they're in their mid-20s.
And here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
High school. You know, Joe, we all have choices, and I'm not trying to close down people's choices. My feeling is when you say you're going to college, there is an implication that you have to like study and pass tests. They have made an absolute fraud of the college experience in basketball. But if baseball players are staying there and they're doing their 4 years and they have something to rely on, that's all power to them. But don't make it seem like you're still being oppressed when someone gives you a scholarship, but you're not getting paid for staying there. That's just that is fruity talk.
I mean, it's not good. And the system sports wide needs to go to, at the very least, the NFL model, where, and believe me, there's enough to criticize about the NFL, but they need to go to the NFL model, in my opinion, where you have to go 3 years, because what's happening, and I would like to ask, different sports psychologists and sports analysts this. I want to know what happens to athletes that don't go to college and post career. What happens to them? There are not many people who go back to college and finish their degrees. There are some, which is great, but there are others that you hear about that they just blow their money away. And before you know it, look at Vince. Have you heard about Vince Young?
No, I haven't specifically, but is he bankrupt?
Vince Young had to, let me make sure I'm right. And I'm actually going to bring this up.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure I got the correct player, but I heard this during, yes, here it is. It is Vince Young.
Mm-hmm.
And he blew all his money away. I mean, how about this? I mean, this was an article that came out in May of 2020. And here's a guy who made $26 million in his career, and he went bankrupt. That shouldn't be happening.
That's
someone who makes $26 million in a career, Chris. Someone who makes $26 million in a career should not be going bankrupt.
It's, you know what? That should be the foundation for generational wealth for like 5 generations. But here's the problem. And this could have been avoided through 4th grade mathematics. Okay. And this is what it makes me crazy. They're old enough to make it. But I want to know who this guy's agent was. I want to know who was his advisors. Because applying 4th grade math, he should have had generational wealth for 5 generations. And that's the problem, Joe. You can give someone a lot of money, but you can't sharpen or build their muscle of discernment. And they have zero discernment, and it's a very sad thing. But just maybe, if they had been to college and met some other people and sharpened their mind, instead of people that were around their lockers as high school juniors to get them to sign up with them as their agent, there wouldn't be. And Vince Young's probably a very nice guy. I'm not against him, but I hear these stories too many times. All you need is 4th grade math.
Way too many times, Chris. Way too many times. And it's sad. And it's sad. And again, I bring up a case where Young had to go 3 years in college. One, he should have finished his degree if he didn't. And again, to be fair, if he did, I'm sorry. We don't know. I don't know if he did or not. But
he's not a bad guy. He just was ill-advised.
Very, very much so. Well, look, the most ill-advised athlete in the history of American sports is Mike Tyson.
Yep.
Mike Tyson was so ill-advised throughout his career. He could have been, okay? And in my opinion, he's one of the top 5 greatest boxers of all time. But Mike Tyson could have easily been the greatest boxer of all time.
Absolutely.
Hands down. But because he got into a bad crowd. He got into a very bad crowd. It led to his downfall and destruction, which was so tragic. However, I want to give Mike Tyson some credit because Mike Tyson has changed his life around after, say 2003, we'll say after the Holyfield incident. Mike Tyson has changed his life around. And Mike Tyson is a really good guy from what I have heard. Okay.
Awesome.
Free thinker. You are aware he was a supporter of President Trump.
Well, here's the thing. Remember when Mr. Trump said, "What have you got to lose?" Many African Americans, many Hispanics, many women say, "You know what? What do we have to lose?" And Tyson was just one of those people. Okay.
Right.
Because remember, Tyson probably boxed a match or two at Trump's hotels in the 80s, right?
More than one or two.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, but here's the thing. I'm glad to hear that about Mike Tyson. He really could not handle life after Customato died. I've never, listen, I'm not a big boxing. Yeah, I'm not a big boxing, aficionado, but I know a hard punch when I see one. And Tyson has the hardest punch I ever saw, and that includes George Foreman, and that includes Joe Frazier's left hook. I had never seen a person who could knock out the cream of the crop in 90 seconds. I never could see a guy who could come off his stool.
One punch,
and knock him into next week. I never saw anybody with his strength. So, yeah, he's one of those guys where it could have been a total disaster, but if he's turned it around, then that's a wonderful thing. It's
the toughest video game around, and I still have not finished the game after all these years, okay, is Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. It is still the most difficult video game around.
Oh, you're supposed to knock him out? Is that the
no, you're supposed to just beat him. It's not even supposed to be knocking him out. You're supposed to just beat him. And you can't even beat him. Unless you have the cheat codes.
Why not?
Cheat codes. It is considered by many video game aficionados considered the most difficult game to finish.
You know what?
Because once you get up to him, you just can't beat him.
Do it. Let me tell you something. Listen, there are people that go crazy over professional wrestling, and it's a scripted thing. But people like, I'm going to get the pay-per-view. And one thing I will give you about wrestling, they will give you a show.
Yes.
Well, remember when Mike Tyson's fights were pay-per-view, back then it was like $29.99. First of all, his fight wouldn't come on till like 11:30 at night Eastern.
That's right.
If you got up to go to the bathroom, you would miss the fight.
That's right.
And you would come back and you would see people, raising his arms. And you're like, well, what happened? Oh, he knocked the guy out in 13 seconds. And you're like, I just spent $30 on 13 seconds.
Remember during the Tyson McNulty fight where people wanted their money back?
Right, because it was so real that it couldn't help but being a ripoff. There was no way you were going to get bang for your entertainment buck. It was impossible with that guy.
Chris, that's what fans want with UFC. They want 20-second fights. They want want to see people get kicked in the head and knocked out.
Right.
That's actually now what they want. That's what people want now.
Right.
Which is very, very interesting. You go from boxing, you want 12 rounds, to UFC, and you want 30 seconds.
Joe, what if you had bought? Let's put it this way: if the pay-per-view was $30, ringside was probably $300 or $400. Does that make
more?
Okay. So let's say $1,000.
Let's say $1,000. Okay.
So you're there, and you want to impress your best lady. So the girl has a mink on, and you want her to be your best girl. You want to be the best guy, and you got a ringside seat. You're like, okay, honey, and you make her sit there till 11:30 at night. And then here's Mike Tyson, and 13 seconds later, you're explaining to her why this cost you $2,000 composite. Like he didn't understand that part of the business. He's like, I'm going to maul my opponent, and I'm going to make it a quick payday, and I'm going to go out to the casino and have a martini. And this is what this guy would do. I never saw a professional athlete totally destroy the opposition the way Tyson did.
I would put him. Let's you bring up a great topic. In your life, the most dominant athletes in the following categories. Let's start off. Might as well start off with basketball.
Michael,
of course.
Right.
I'm sorry, Michael is still the greatest athlete of all time. There is no comparison. I don't care if you want to talk about, with all due respect to Kobe, because I think Kobe had an outstanding career. However, I still think he was one shade below Michael.
Let me tell you how great Michael Jordan is. Michael Jordan was so great that 2 of the championship winning shots that on teams that he won were Steve Kerr and John Paxson because they were double teaming Michael Jordan. He made those guys famous with open jump shots to win championships because Jordan was so great. You couldn't help but double him. And then some guy that you say, oh, I don't have to worry about that. They beat you for the championship. That's how great Michael Jordan was.
Then, of course, there's the flu game, the infamous flu game.
Right, where he has like 115 temperature, like, and he's going out there and he's dripping with sweat. He's about to be hospitalized. They have IVs in his arm. He's practically playing with an oxygen tank on his back.
He's puking his guts every 20 minutes.
And he was the best player on the floor, and he hit the shot to win the championship.
Well, that was game 5, but yes.
Right, you know what I'm saying. You're wrong. Okay. He went to win that game. But he was the one who had the game-winning shot under a siege of something. Hey, Joe, let's be honest. From a fever standpoint, it was worse than COVID.
That's correct.
From a fever standpoint, this guy was playing a basketball game with 103, 104. That's like convulsions.
And by the way, and the funniest thing, when they interviewed Jordan, did you see the 10-part series on ESPN at the start of the pandemic?
Right. Yeah.
That was, I highly recommend everyone. You don't even have to be a sports fan to watch this 10-part series about the championship bowls. And Jordan talks about how after he won that game, he actually felt better. He felt so much better after the game.
Yeah,
it was incredible. Here's a guy that has had the nastiest of stomach flus,
right?
And puking his guts out. And after the game, he felt, besides feeling exhausted, he actually felt better.
Well, that's the adrenaline of the champion.
Yeah.
They always feel better when the mountain is climbed, and that's why he was able to do that. It was the adrenaline of the champion. He's like, I'm going to win this. I'm going to win this. What are you going to do? Bury me after the game? Fine, but I'm going to go down a winner.
All right, next sport. See, that one I knew you and I would agree on. Next sport, baseball.
It's interesting because when you asked me the question before, I began to go through players in my mind for baseball. And I think about great
Let's do best hitter and best pitcher. Let's do it that way.
The best hitter, I think, pound for pound, was George Brett, because he hit 390. He could hit for power, but he was a line drive hitter. Today's baseball, they just care about small parks and hitting the ball into the stands, but they forget what happens if you can't make a productive out. George Brett could do it all. If contact was needed, he would give you the sac fly. If hitting behind the runner in a hit and run, he'd give you the single to right. If you needed a 3-run jack off a Goose Gossage, he gave you that. So I think, and he was a Gold Glover at third. So I would say George Brett. And pitcher, the best pitcher I probably ever saw with mechanics and endurance and courage and power was probably Tom Seaver.
For pitcher, because I did not see Seaver, and I would, if I was 15 years older, I would have said Seaver. But for pitcher, for me, is Randy Johnson.
Sure. Okay. There's no wrong answers.
And Randy Johnson with a closer, of course, of the GOAT. I mean, there is no close second for closer than Mariano.
No, because no one ever got him. Maybe you could say Alomar.
Well, no, except for the steroid guys of the Red Sox. Those are the only guys.
Exactly. That's the thing. And that's another thing, Joe, and that matters to me too. We mentioned Tripucka and O'Koren. Playing the game clean means a lot to me.
Yes.
Because you're going to be rich anyway. Why do you want to cheat? And I don't care. I don't care if, there wasn't a rule against it. You're putting something in your body that is giving you an advantage that, I'm sorry, doesn't come from lifting weights. You're making yourself more of a sideshow. It becomes more like entertainment. And I want to see, reason why we love sports, Joe, is because we love real competition.
That's right.
That's why we loved Mike Tyson, because no one could stand up to his punch. No, and it was legitimate. His punch was real, So what you say about Randy Johnson, like I said, there's no wrong answers. He was clean. Look what he did, right?
Well, for hitter / I'll name two. I'll name two guys. Griffey was, the fielder that Griffey was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was a highlight reel. And let's not forget 600 career home runs.
Right.
Almost 600. Almost 600. Right. But yeah. And then how about Dave Winfield?
Yeah. 300.
Dave Winfield could have played pro basketball. He could have played pro football. And he decided to play baseball.
You know what the wildest stat I heard recently, Brother Joe, and you and I are statisticians at heart. That's
go right ahead.
This was my favorite stat of all time. If you took all of the home runs away from Hank Aaron, he still had 3,100 hits.
That's right. And
if you take the 755?
755.
He actually had over 3,000 other hits.
That's right.
Isn't that amazing? Think about that.
Yeah.
If that guy played today he may have gotten 4,200 hits. Pete Rose may have gotten 5,500 hits. Yeah, Pete Rose may have gotten 5,500 hits because people don't know what to do with a line drive hitter.
By the way, you want to talk about a bully on the field? Pete Rose.
Oh,
there's a reason why they call him Charlie Hustle. There was a reason why they called him Charlie Hustle.
And can I tell you something? When I was a little kid, because he had that fight with Bud Harrelson, I hate Pete Rose when I was a kid. But then I started watching him. He was like the Mark Messier of baseball. He just played on winners. He was fearless, and he loved baseball. Now, listen, I understand what he did was wrong. Don't get me wrong. But he didn't cheat the game. He earned every hit. The guy had over 4,200, 4,191 or whatever. He's the greatest hitter, among the greatest.
I'm actually more concerned about Pete Rose, the person, than Pete Rose, the athlete, and what he did with the gambling. I'm more concerned about the case back in the 70s with him and the statutory rape of a 14, 15-year-old.
Right.
To me, that is alarming. And, maybe one of these days we'll hear the truth about that, but we probably won't. And I'm not holding my breath on that. But, let's transition to football, because I think you and I are going to have different answers. But you and I are going to have different answers for a reason, because you are a fan. You are to the best of my knowledge, I believe you are a Jets fan. And of course, correct. Jets fans do not like the Patriots at all.
No, but here's the thing. I would sound like a fool if I say anybody else but Tom Brady, but I do believe, I want to make this little note. Tom Brady and Joe Montana play a different game. Joe Montana could get knocked into next week without a flag. Tom Brady is protected. So he's playing at his age because he's protected. He's the spotted owl. When Joe Montana and Dan Marino played, your whole idea was to knock him out of the game. So, yeah, I know people say Brady, but I would take Montana because he played football.
And I'm going to take Brady because 7 Super Bowls is not an easy accomplishment for anybody.
Amen.
Period.
I understand what you're saying. And you know what? Who can argue? By
the way, my number 2 would have been Montana, even though it was great. And I have on the YouTube stream a Giants fan,
right,
who is a young lady from Houston, Texas, Giants fan, okay? And she said that Tom Brady is evil. And remember when I was on your show? As a matter of fact, I called into your show. And I have to say I was wrong, even though I still think I'm right. And the whole Deflategate. And you specifically asked me to come on your show and talk about Deflategate. And I said he would not be suspended. And the rigged Roger Goodell, which I cannot stand that man. I think he is the worst commissioner in all of sports by far, not even close. They suspend Brady. That only gave fuel to the fire. One of my favorite moments was when they came all the way back to beat the Falcons to win in overtime, and Goodell had to give Brady the Super Bowl trophy. That was that same season. And it was hilarious to see the puss on Roger Goodell's face when he's handing the trophy to the New England Patriots with Tom Brady standing next to him.
Well, I would think in my entire life that had to be the worst coaching I had ever seen. If I was an Atlanta Falcon fan, and I'd been through a history of Steve Bartkowski's and near misses and bad years.
I believe that was Mike Smith, correct? Was the head coach? Was that the guy's name?
Yeah, right. But you're talking about an expansion team that goes back to the 60s. And you finally not only make the Super Bowl, but you were in control in the Super Bowl where all you have to do is take a knee. You could have taken a knee on your last 3 possessions and the clock would have ran out. But you kept the ball in the air. The clock stopped. You gave Brady the time to come back. I would say this, Joe, if we're talking about all-time greats or players that have set themselves apart, that coaching by the Atlanta Falcons by far was the worst bit of coaching that I have ever seen with so much on the line. And they've never recovered. They got a great owner, a colorful owner. I will never get over that. Tom Brady, whether it was the Seahawks when Pete Carroll donated that Super Bowl by calling that slant play instead of giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch, and what the Falcons did. Yeah, Brady had 7, but he earned only 5.
Interesting you say that. Interesting you say that. However, it's funny because the one team that owned Tom Brady, there was one team that owned Tom Brady through the years.
Yeah, the Giants.
The Giants.
And you know, how did the Giants do it? With good old-fashioned inside pressure.
Old school football. That's
Absolutely.
how you beat them. Old
Amen.
School football.
Absolutely. And they
You play Belichick's game. That's what you do. You play Belichick's own game.
Right.
That's how you beat him. You beat him
by
playing his own game.
Joe, why do I know the name Justin Tuck or Osi Umenyiora? Because these guys put the pressure on Brady and gave Eli the opportunities that he had.
Strahan had an outstanding final game of his career.
Right. So, you know, I think that there is. Listen, I'm anti-patriot in this way because, listen, in that room, that owner will always remind everybody, we're making you a lot of money. I want my quarterback upright. And I'm sorry, every time that guy gets touched, he looks at the referee. It makes me crazy, Joe. You know, it makes me crazy. We're playing football, Joe.
But the Tuck rule?
Yeah, well, you know, the Tuck rule, I'm not mad at the Tuck rule, whatever that was. But not being able to hit that quarterback is a disgrace. Because I grew up on Joe Namath with teams trying to knock him out. And you think Tom Brady would have played under those rules? He would have been selling insurance after his first year. If Tom Brady was chased by Buck Buchanan and Ben Davidson and Ed Too Tall Jones and L.C. Greenwood, he would have.
And of course, the toughest one of them all, Dick Butkus.
Exactly.
Let's not forget Dick Butkus and Mike Ditka and all those other hardcore guys.
Right. Brady would have became a yoga instructor somewhere. Okay. He has no maracas. He likes to stick it up your butt when he has all this time to throw and you can't touch him. And he has these little midgets going out in the pass pattern like Edelman and all these guys. The reason why he's able to do that, Joe, is because they're not playing tackle football. That's all I got to say.
Chris, that is really, really funny that you say this. One thing that I'm going to try to experiment with my podcast,
right,
is there's an app now called Clubhouse. Do you have an Android, right?
No. I got a Flintstone. I've got an iPhone.
No. So there's a person that's currently live on here. Karen, please go on mute. So there's currently one person that's currently live. So what I'm going to do, and I think this is what you guys should do when you come back.
Okay.
Clubhouse has been an outstanding format for people. You put them in a hallway and they ask questions. So there is right now I have one person in here and live, and I'm going to try as we get through more and more episodes talk about more. But one of just so you know, the person that I have in here, her name is Karen. I'm just going to say first name. I'm not going to mention who she is or whatnot. And we're talking to Karen. We're talking to Chris Ponte, who is the host of the Chris Ponte Show in Danbury, Connecticut. And he's also the host of the Chris Ponte Show on the Truth Be Told radio network that you can watch 5 days a week. Chris is, through the years has talked about different politics. He is a free thinker. He has had on many guests like Burgess Owens and Anna Kate on his show. Do you have any, I guess, this person that I know is going to ask a question, and please, Karen, if you want to ask a question, you don't have to. But one topic that I do want to address that, during the halfway point, and I'm not afraid to bring this up, even though I'm live on all the platforms, is, one thing we have not talked about is the pandemic. And sadly, we've had 580,000 Americans who have sadly perished. And we've had 580,000 Americans sadly perish, 3 million overall. Chris, what I want to ask you is, what do you think has been so drastically wrong and what needs to be corrected for a pandemic like this to never happen again?
Very simple. Access to the truth, access to the medicine that I want. I'm going to give you guys a story. This is a real story. It has everything to do with getting better and wellness. This happened to my friend, Dr. Jane Ruby. Jane at the time was in Virginia. She got COVID. At the same time, she had a friend in Florida who got COVID. They both got it terribly, bad symptoms, really awful, awful stuff. She went to the hospital and they essentially sent her home with Advil. Okay. She experienced symptoms for 75 days. Her friend in Florida went to the doctor, got hydroxychloroquine, was healed in 3 days. 75 days versus 3 days. Let me know if this is the United States of America. Never again should answers to problems be politicized. The pandemic could have been a fleeting, passing thing, except the truth of help, the truth of the antidote was suppressed. And that's my answer.
And she was a guest on your show, if I am not mistaken.
Exactly what happened. She was told that if she went to the hospital, she would get the hydroxychloroquine. She went to the hospital. They're like, oh, sorry, we weren't.
Which state?
Virginia.
Virginia. Okay. So
Virginia versus Florida. She's now a resident of Florida.
Has she fully recovered, even though
Yes.
it was 75 days of being sick?
Yep. And her friend had the same thing within 3 days with the HCQ done. Now, here's the problem, guys, with whether it's hydroxychloroquine and Dr. Ryan Cole, Joe. You want to get someone on your podcast that's going to rock your world? Get Dr. Ryan Cole out of Idaho, one of my new heroes. He gave people HCQ, ivermectin. 90% of his patients never went into the hospital. They didn't die. They were never intubated because he had access to the antidote. All I ask for is access to the truth. And oh, by the way, my body, my choice also means for me too.
I've always been a believer of using all the tools in the tool shed. If we have so much at this point, how many more peer-reviewed studies do we need to show that these drugs that you have mentioned, and again, we are not doctors, we recommend, and what I have been recommending from the beginning of the pandemic is to call, if your doctor will not prescribe it to you, you go to speakwithanmd.com, and there are others. Pierre Corey is, and the FLCCC group. I know in Canada, there is Dr. Ira Bernstein. He has done an outstanding job with his patients. In the United States, Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Richard Urso have done an outstanding job with their patients.
Joe, let me just run this back.
Oh, and you mentioned Ryan Cole. How many patients has Cole taken care of?
Like thousands. They went through his thing and went through as a patient, and this is what they did. Guys, let me tell you something. You want to know why Andrew Cuomo is a criminal? Because Mr. Trump built him a hospital at the Javits Center, sent him a ship to the ports, and he sent infected people back to infect other people, and 15,000 folks died. That's when medicine becomes political. And that could have been one of your loved ones. That's all. The proof is in the pudding.
Yes, it is. And let me bring up, and I want to bring up, have you heard about Peter McCullough? He's been lately on Tucker Carlson. No, but if the fact that you're mentioning him, he probably is someone that told the bureaucrats, I took the Hippocratic Oath. I know the tools I have in the tool shed, and I'm going to make my patients better. Am I right or wrong? Exactly. And he spoke in front of the Texas State Senate back in March, along with Dr. Urso. And I'm going to bring up another issue. I think this is actually more controversial now than ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And yes, I'll say the words. I think promoting good health is controversial now. Why are doctors not promoting good health? If people were in good health, you wouldn't see 600,000 people dead. Now, again, let's be fair. Half the deaths have occurred amongst those over the age of 78, Chris. Okay? However, how about those in their under 50 that have died? The overwhelming majority of them were not healthy. All you got to do is look at the state records.
Joe, let me tell you what happened to me. When I went for my last physical, they had the blood work. And the blood work, thank God, was fine. You would think I would have gotten a clear bill of health. No, my doctor says, you know what you need, Chris? What do I need, doc? You sure you don't want to take the shingles vaccine? You sure you don't want to have the flu vaccine? You sure you don't want this vaccine? I'm like, what are you trying to sell me? I said, my blood work is pristine. They don't want to let go and say, you're doing a hell of a job. I had to turn him down 5 times. He should be asking me, Ponte, what are you doing to make your blood so pristine? They don't want you in good health. They want more needles in your arms. They want you subservient to these pharmaceutical companies. It's a disgrace.
It is. It is. Well, we should be promoting good health.
Joe,
we should be promoting good health.
Right. I'm in good health. You should give me a little pat on the butt before you check my.
And by the way, I want to make sure I'm right. 58 years old, right?
Yep. And
well, and this is what I recommend. I'm curious. The following you should know by now at your age. You should know your A1C and you should know your vitamin D. Do you know it?
I take the D and the C, and my vitamin D is playing the great D. That's what vitamin D stands for. Not only is it a vitamin, it's the only cell that has a receptacle for vitamin D. In all of your cells, you need vitamin D. It plays defense against virus. Do you think Fauci told you that? No, Ponte told you that because Dr. Ryan Cole told Ponte.
And Richard Urso has been promoting vitamin D for the last year. That's where I got it from. And now my vitamin D, which when I was 472 pounds, my vitamin D count was at 8. Now it's at 64.
Good for you. Good for you. You're playing good D, Joe.
Yes, exactly. Like basketball, got to play good D.
Right. You got to play good D, and your body needs good D. You know where you get good D from? Vitamin D.
Yes, vitamin D in the sun. Vitamin D but why? Why is this happening? Okay? Is Big Pharma become that big? Is Big Pharma become that big to do that?
Yeah, because they're going to try to legislate good health on your own out of the circle. You're not going to be able to get inside the circle for a physical unless you're fully vaccinated. But I'm healthy.
Insane, Chris. It's we have gone insane on this planet. We have gone totally insane and to shame. It really, really is a shame.
You know, call me what you want. I didn't go to medical school, but I got common sense. And when I began looking into this stuff, folks, just let me tell you something, okay? The pharmaceutical world, as it relates to antibiotics, it's beautiful. If you have strep throat, go get penicillin, okay? Everything else, if you need surgery, the doctor can do surgery, good for you. Well, every chronic disease occurs because of lack of vitamins and minerals. This is the way it is. But the pharmaceutical world and the doctor that you go to, they want to make you a customer. The last thing they want is for you to be in good health. Folks, I can't tell you how many times the doctor tried to get a needle in my arm while he had the stats that I was perfectly fine. So, Joe, you've done a great job with your health. And all I'm telling people, draw your own conclusions, do your own research, but please do research because these people are just trying to get into your bloodstream.
That's right. Do your own research. Do your own research. Find out what you are deficient in. Find out.
Amen. Right?
Because you, at the same time, you also don't want to go too overboard with vitamins. You don't want to have a vitamin D of 110. Right. Okay, your vitamin D, what's considered a very good vitamin D level is between 60 and 75. That is, and not 30. 30 is not considered, even though they consider it normal. 30 is not. 30 is, I mean, sure, you'll make out okay, but you really ideally want it 60. You want it 60 to 75. Again, we are not doctors. We ask you. You have to ask your physician for these tests. Okay, I have been taking vitamin D for 8 years now, and that is only because when my vitamin D was 8, the specialist at the weight management center that I joined for a period of time, they told me you have to go on vitamin D. You have to go on. So I mean, and then the other one I take every day is B complex. I take a B complex with niacin and B12.
That's for the mind.
That's for the mind. That's right.
In the mind. The B vitamins are key. Forget about you want to know why you're anxious, folks? Because your B's are low. You don't have a deficiency of Paxil. You have a deficiency of B. How are you going to know that? Get your blood drawn, find out your levels.
That's
Joe, today, I'm listening. I watched one of the great interviews of all time, Tucker Carlson with Kirstie Alley, who I loved as Rebecca Howe on Cheers. I mean, I love this woman. I mean, I was certifiably crazy about this woman. Okay. She's 70 years old now, and she's pro-Trump, but she's a Scientologist. So everything with her, she wants to find out why you feel, and vitamins are very, very important to her. And she voted for Obama twice, and no one said boo about her political feelings and yada yada yada. In 2017, she told people that she voted for Trump simply because Mr. Trump's point of view made common sense to her. The producer, folks, pulled her aside and said, you can do anything you want, but don't ever say that again. You may never work again. When she voted for Obama, no one threatened her. No one threatened her, folks, with her job. But when she voted for Trump, Hollywood, which is supposed to be this bastion of tolerance, which is a bunch of bull, they threatened her. They threatened her with the very blackballing that they always were officially against in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. So, you know what, guys? This is why God gave you that beautiful gray matter. It's not to sit there and be a sheep. You have to sit there and say, does this make common sense to me? Folks, you're paying $3.30 for gas. Under Trump, it was $1.40. How can you say this is better? You gotta reason it for yourself. Go ahead, Joe.
Exactly. And you brought up a great interview with Kirstie Alley, because she went through a lifestyle change. Right. You saw her on the Nutrisystem commercials all the time.
Right.
And it's, I just don't understand. I don't understand why the topic of good health by all of these platforms has become so controversial. I don't get it. I don't understand why people think that, good health is a bad thing. When did that become such a bad thing? I don't get it.
You want to know what became a bad thing? When Dr. Fauci got up there with his bag of bull, and he was saying one thing one minute, the next thing another minute, and what they tried to keep you from doing was from going on mydoctor.com, for not tuning in with the McCulloughs of the world, or not listening to the Dr. Ryan Coles of the world. They wanted you essentially to be paralyzed by fear and just listen to Dr. Fauci, who, by the way, hasn't seen a patient in 40 years.
Yeah.
That's right. Who hasn't seen a patient in 40 years.
Yeah. You're right. But
they don't want you thinking, Joe. And this is, they don't want you thinking.
It's bigger. This is bigger than COVID, though. This is definitely bigger than COVID, because COVID is one thing, okay? But the obesity problem and people being unhealthy and addicts and everything else is another problem. And that's what we're going to have to deal with post-pandemic. We really have to have a movement in this country of promoting good health. And the problem is that doctors don't know about nutrition. Doctors don't know about promoting nutrition and promoting people to be fit, to be well known. All they'll tell you is, here's a sheet. Here's a sheet for a diet. That's it. Here's your sheet. This is what you do. That's not it. That's not it. What you have to tell people, for starters, here, when I had you talk about Kirstie Alley, I was getting some water, okay? This is all I drink. Everything I drink is water, for the exception of one day a week, because of somebody that I will discuss on a future episode, okay? That person recommended that I put in 7 ounces of a product, and I am not they're not a sponsor of mine, but I am going to mention them because I highly recommend them, is Hydrolyte. Because I would have a little bit of calf issues. I would take I take the Hydrolyte every single day, and I take it with the extra zinc and I take the elderberry one with the extra zinc and the extra vitamin C. Gone in 10 minutes. Gone in 10 minutes.
You know, this is something, Joe, it's good for me to throw out to you, and it's good for people to listen. I shop at a place called Stop and Shop. Okay, it's a big food store. There's a pharmacy in the Stop and Shop. It's kind of a strange place to put an outlet for sickness, which is why you go to the pharmacy, in a place that you're supposed to obtain food, which is supposed to keep you from sickness. Why am I going to a store that has a place to get drugs from when I get sick from buying products at that store? It doesn't make any sense. Do they have pharmacies in Trader Joe's? No. Do they have pharmacies at health food stores? No. The Food and Drug Administration is allowing.
I want to interrupt you for a second. I want to interrupt you for a second. You want to talk about the Food and Drug Administration? I want to go one further. I want to know why Amazon it seems like all of a sudden it almost seems like they're kind of monopolizing that industry. Why?
Why not? One voice versus 50. They don't want 50 voices. They're just eating up all the lefts.
We have a massive monopoly problem in this country now.
Right.
This is the 19 teens all over again.
Right.
On steroids.
Expansion, recession, suppression into a handful of 5 or 6 companies. Look at communications, Joe. In the 1980s, there was like over 90 broadcasting companies in America. It's now down to like 6. There's like they're all big conglomerates. All you're hearing is one voice. And because competition is a sin, it's all the same voice. It's all the same.
That's right.
Whether it's Google or Amazon or Comcast, it's all the same.
It is all the same.
Voice.
It is all the same. And that's a problem. Because what's happening is that, well, it's a bad problem, but then I'm going to tell you why long-term that's a good problem. Bad problem, of course, is the obvious. People are warped into that one problem. However, what you're starting to see is people rising up and saying, we're not taking it anymore. We're not taking this anymore. You're telling us X and we see Y.
Right.
And that's a problem. And I'm telling you, even the biggest critics, even the people that we are disagreeing the most are now starting to see this. And I want to flat out ask right now, why is the director of the NIAID and Bill Gates all of a sudden being investigated? I mean, you look, they're being grilled by the media all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks.
I got a better one for you. Why was Bill Gates asking Jeffrey Epstein about marriage advice? I mean, you're going to a pedophile. I mean, these people are sick, Joe. Why was Bill Gates? Hey, Jeff, can I ask you something? I got a real pain in the neck as a wife.
I want to just bring this up. These are articles that we have found in the New York Post and other media sources. We are not, again, we are reading these from media sources. I have to say this because I'm live streaming on different platforms.
Okay,
But you're right. But you're right. Why are they doing that? And then Rand Paul grilling the director of the NIAID. You will notice I will not refer to him by name. I refuse to. I will not mention his name on here. Period. He doesn't deserve it because he has been so wrong so often. And that's with the AIDS crisis. Let's not even talk about now. Let's talk about the AIDS. We could talk about the AIDS crisis all day long. And I have talked to people during this pandemic and talk about how much of a disaster that man was back in the 80s. And that so many people sadly died because he prevented the experimental treatment that is now being used today to save people.
Here's the thing, Joe. A virus is like a knuckleball. You don't know where it's going to go. But they didn't allow the American population to make up our own rules and think about the best way. They decided to shut everything down. Let's be at each other's throats, wear a mask, 6 feet apart. I had one guy come up to me, Joe, I was not wearing a mask. I forgot my mask. He says to me, "I hope you effing die." I was in line at a bagel shop.
How recently was this?
This was last April, May.
Okay, so this was the start of the pandemic.
Yeah,
and by the way, this is where one of the issues that you and I disagree on. I am pro mask, even though data shows that mask mandates are statistically insignificant. And I know that because I'm the one that looked up that did the study. Right. Okay, I'm the one that took the numbers and did the study. So, but that doesn't mean that masks don't work, and I think that they do to an extent. However, to me, I mean, again, this as a scientist, what you do is you think about things. You always come up with, you think of a theory and then you try to debunk it if you can, or see if it works and whatnot. Right. But you use all the tools in the tool shed. Whatever happened to using all the tools in the tool shed? Okay? And so why aren't we using the early and aggressive treatment? Okay? You brought up a classic example of someone that went on that 2 days later the woman is better, whereas your friend in Virginia did not get it. Did you say she was hospitalized?
Yep. She went there. She eventually had to get hospitalized. They wouldn't give her the medicine. And after a couple of days, they sent her home, and she dealt with symptoms for 75 days. It took before she got her taste back.
Wow.
And her friend in Florida is doing cartwheels on the 4th day.
Right. And that is what I'm also hearing. And right. It's tragic. It is so tragic to hear these stories. And you hear them all the time.
Where was the military? We should be able to get what we want in this country. We don't have like a different constitution under a pandemic. What I still remember, the Bill of Rights exists, and I should be able to get my medicine sent to me if I want to try it, because when it comes to abortion, my body was my choice. But when it came to a virus, they sorry.
Whatever happened to right to try?
Right.
And then again, to be fair, right to try is used when someone is on their deathbed, essentially. That, to be fair. However, a family, I mean, how about the 3 cases in New York? The 2 cases in New York and the 1 case in Chicago, where they were literally, the hospital said, we have no other options. So the families all said, let's use ivermectin. And the hospital said, no, you can't do that. So what they did, they got a lawyer, they went to court, they won. They were prescribed ivermectin, they saved their lives. And in 2 of the cases, they're home. The woman currently in Chicago, she's going on a trach, and she's going to be finally off a ventilator very soon. That is the latest. And hopefully she recovers. Unfortunately, there was a case in New York. There was a case right here on Long Island, and I'm going to bring it up because Newsday refuses to bring it up, but I will, where family had to go to court. Family won twice. They gave one prescription each time of the medicine, which is not what you're supposed to do. And then the hospital stopped giving it and said, oh, she's not getting any better. Now, to be fair, would she have recovered? She was in bad shape to begin with. However, there was no other options. She's on a ventilator for who knows how long at this point, okay? And it was sad. But, I mean, they wanted to fail. And what was sad was the lady eventually passed away about 10 days ago. And it was very, very sad. And the article was written by Mary Beth Pfeiffer, who is an outstanding journalist covering the situation with ivermectin. And by the way, Mary Beth Pfeiffer is not a fan of President Trump at all. Okay, some of the people that I've also followed and listened to are not fans, are not Republicans by any means. To me, this is not a political issue at all. This is an issue about humanity. Okay.
How do you keep medicine from people?
Exactly.
Why do I have to go to court to get a bottle of Flintstone chewables? Why in God's
Get ready for this one. Get ready for this one. NAC now, you have to get only by prescription. NAC.
Right.
There's a rumor there's talk about B12 and melatonin.
Last time I checked, MDs weren't writing prescriptions for these because they can't make money off it. What are they going to do? Tell the naturopaths that these things can't be part of their life as a doctor? How about their Hippocratic oath? I mean, no one takes that seriously, Joe. How do you live? How do you sleep at night knowing that you know people? And here's another thing. These COVID tests, if you remember at the beginning, it took 5 to 6 days to find out whether or not you had COVID. Right now, they could do it in hours. But in those 5 days, you went to a point where you were probably hospitalized because they couldn't give you any medicine until they had the test result.
That's right.
Whatever happened by using your gut and hedging your bets, you could say, okay, I think you have it. We'll take the test. In the meantime, take the hydroxychloroquine. You get with it right away. You attack it.
Exactly. Before you find out the results. Because first off, those two drugs are safer than Tylenol and aspirin. Okay. I have the list by the FDA from 2015. It's public information. The 50 most dangerous drugs in the world. Okay. By the FDA.
Right.
HCQ and IVM are not on the list.
Man.
They are safe drugs. Now, with the caveat, you don't take HCQ late. You gotta only take it early.
Right.
Because they have issues of heart palpitations late, and it's further proof it is showing it does not work late. However, ivermectin does work at all levels. At all stages.
Joe, I don't know about you, but when I go to the doctor, the worst thing is when they tell you, well, Chris, you have a virus. Like sometimes I'm begging to have a bacteria, so I know I'm going to get the penicillin, But if I thought I had COVID, I want to walk out with something that I could do, not just sit as a sitting duck for 5 minutes.
Right.
And this is what they took from people.
This is well before COVID.
Right.
This has been going on for at least a decade, I've noticed.
Give me something. What can I take, Doc? Remember, he would give you the freebies. He's like, here, take a couple of these. You're like, fine. You got whiskey? I'll down it with a shot of whiskey. You'll take it with anything. You'll take it with anything. Anything that you think is going to make you better. And then they're like, okay, let me get a jump on it. You're like, good. But there's COVID. They're like, well, we're not going to know for 7 days. Let me know if you can't breathe. And then we'll have someone drive you to the hospital. Who waits till you can't breathe?
Unfortunately, too many people. And you know what's the saddest thing? How about all those people in nursing homes? How many of them did not need to die?
Doctor, that's Yeah, Andrew Cuomo, where did he go to med school? He made medical decisions that killed people. He's essentially, if you took Dr. Kevorkian and you made him a governor, that would have been Andrew Cuomo.
Except that Kevorkian, at least those people died with dignity.
Yeah, you didn't die with dignity, intubated. It's horrible. Trump built him a hospital at the Javits Center, Joe. There were thousands of beds open.
By the way, there were 4 other hospitals on Long Island not even used. They built 4 other hospitals. And by the way, there was one in Brooklyn, never used, spent $21 million. Article in the Post, if for those curious.
Right.
Okay? Not even used. And how about all the tents at Central Park? How about all the tents at Central Park that barely had any patients? How about the ships?
You don't think this was coordinated, Joe? They wanted to run up those death counts so they could use it against President Trump. And Newsom was like this, and Cuomo was like this, and Whitmer was like this, and they made fun of DeSantis. Who, by
Hold on a second. Whoa. Stop right there. I don't want the governor of New Jersey and the governor of PA to be left out. Those two are just as bad. As a matter of fact, if you think Cuomo's bad, look at Wolf.
Right. Okay, you're right. Everybody but DeSantis, who, by the way, and just so you know, Joe by dementia, that's what I call him. He said that Texas was crazy and Neanderthal for opening up their entire ballpark for the Texas Rangers in April. There are 0 COVID deaths in Texas. Who's the Neanderthal, Joe?
Well, to be fair, that's only one individual day on a weekend. That was only one individual day on a weekend. However, look at the cases. Look at the death 7-day average. See, what you have to do is you look at me looking at the numbers. You look at the 7-day averages. And the 7-day averages, when you have a state of 30 million people and you're averaging 25 to 30 deaths a day, you're getting more people dying of heart attacks in the state and more people dying. How about this? I'm going to be blunt. You got more people. I will make you a bet that more people this year died of alcohol poisoning under the age of 25 than of COVID.
Right. And just so you know, this is the one thing Dr. Ryan Cole said. The average age of death never changed. It was 78.8 when it started, and it's still 78.8 now. You would have thought that we lost our entire population. But, Joe, it was a scare-demic. It had nothing to do with being reasonable or commonsensical. Or how about, and this makes me crazy, how about these marches, these George Floyd destruction marches last year in Philadelphia, where your business was destroyed because the cops were standing down? How is that America? It's a disgrace.
It hasn't been, and it's not America, and it hasn't. And what is so tragic? And by the way, there's your proof. There was your proof right there. That outdoor transmission of COVID was so weak. Because while all that was going on, the numbers back in the summer kept going down, except for the South and the Sun Belt. Would you like to know why the South and the Sun Belt went up? You know, when everyone was criticizing Abbott and DeSantis of why your numbers were going up, do you know why? Because I know why. We have enough evidence now. It's seasonal endemic. Viruses and influenzas become seasonal pandemic. Despite the fact that fraud, this one I will say his name, Michael Osterholm is a fraud. He has been wrong every single step of the way. And thank goodness the Biden administration finally saw it, because they almost put him on the COVID task force. Almost. But then they noticed, this guy's a Looney Tunes.
Yep.
You know, this guy's a Looney Tunes, and they decide, we can't have him. And I'm going to tell you why this guy's a Looney Tunes. Because he said seasonality doesn't work. Well, This is where seasonality works. When you see the rise in Michigan, the first rise and the second rise, we now have 14 months of data, which means we have more than a year. Okay? Those declines went down 4 days apart. Seasonality. Right there. Seasonality.
Yep. Dr. Ryan talked about that. Yep.
Just this has become seasonal endemic. The numbers, that's why I've been saying all along, we don't have the definitive proof yet if the vaccines are fully working. Okay? We're not going to know that until the fall wave. We're not going to know that until the fall wave. But
that's another thing. But anyway.
But I want to talk about one more thing, and then I will. And this has been an outstanding hour and 40-minute conversation, Chris.
Oh, this is what you and I do. This is what we did before kickoff, and this is what we do after show. You got to
come on more frequently because I'm having a blast doing this. Okay, I'm having an absolute blast on the premiere. You know. Probably by the end of this, I'm probably gonna get banned off everywhere, and I'm gonna have to go on
have we lost Karen? Is Karen still there, or is she checked out?
No. She messaged me before, and she's definitely. As a matter of fact, she brought up Dr. Tyson.
Okay.
Who is another one treated a ton of patients.
A lawsuit from some
here's another one.
Okay.
Tyson owns urgent care centers in Imperial Valley, California. Okay? That county that his urgent care centers are in have a fatality rate of 3.2%. And he has been which is a very high death rate for anywhere.
Right.
He's outside of San Diego, 4,300 patients, fatality rate 0.07%.
And what was his trick?
Well, you've mentioned his trick.
Right. Because if you go to urgent care, they really don't know what the word urgent means. I don't know if you've noticed.
No, but then there are groups of doctors like McCullough, Urso, and Tyson that
are doing great work.
Who work urgent care areas, and they run facilities.
Well, awesome.
This is what they're doing because all of these doctors are fed up hearing the words "ride it out." Ride it out. I mean, you know what a doctor should say then? Well, you got your death sentence.
Amen. They're not trying to make you better, Joe.
No.
They took them 10 years, $300,000 worth of bills from medical school for them to sit on their hands and politicize medicine. It's horrible.
And Chris, I want to go one further. You don't start vitamin D when you get sick. You start vitamin D months and years before. I have been on vitamin D for 8 years now. Okay.
You're playing D. You're playing good D.
Right. That's actually a very good analogy. That's an excellent analogy that I'm going to take for with my future guests. That you're playing D. It's a great sports analogy. You're playing D.
Playing D. It's like Dave DeBuscher, Walt Frazier, Willis Reed, Lawrence Taylor.
Those are some teams.
You're playing D.
Those were some great basketball teams. By the way,
the visual when you take vitamin D, seriously, the visual is Dave DeBuscher on the rebound. Lawrence Taylor, Clyde Frazier. That's what you're doing. That's what vitamin D is. You're playing D.
That's actually a great analogy. I'm thinking of Lawrence Taylor destroying the quarterbacks.
Right.
Oh my goodness. What?
Right?
Talk about an incredible linebacker.
There you go, Joe. But I wanted to give you a visual.
By the way, hold on. This is coming on my phone. Top story. Breakthrough COVID found in more than 10,000 vaccinated Americans. CDC. Here's another thing we need to find out. Why are patients getting a zero antibody response to the COVID shot? We need to know that. Okay? That's not a controversial topic. Okay? I'm a freedom of choice guy. You want to get the vaccine? Get it. You choose not to, because of X, Y, and Z, fine.
Amen.
But what we need to know is why. Why are people coming up with zero antibody response? Could it be because it takes longer for them to get antibodies? Or is it the fact that whatever the attempt in trying to get the spike protein to produce the antibodies is just not working? Then we have to find out. And to be fair, every story needs to be, every case needs to be investigated by VAERS, okay? But we need to know, why do we hear story after story after story of people getting sick, of people having trouble with the after the shots, okay? I don't want to hear that nobody's gotten sick or died. Sadly, I mean, they even admitted there was, at the very least, a Miami doctor who came down with severe thrombocytopenia, which is the condition that I have. I have chronic ITP, and that's why I'm concerned about it. I was, by the way, I was 1 week away from going on a Johnson & Johnson trial and then I heard all these stories about thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, and platelet counts and platelet aggregation. And I'm like, wait a second, I have a platelet issue. Why am I going to potentially harm myself? Right. If this is going on, this is weird. So I'm more pro question than I am not an anti-vaxxer by any means, but I am pro question. However, you bring up a great point. Whenever you go to the doctor, all they ask you is about vaccine. Why vaccine? How about you exercise? How about going out in the sun and getting fresh air? I mean, since when did good health become so controversial? And
hey,
that
Joe,
is,
you come into Dr. Ponte's office, and for those 10,000 people who got vaccinated and still have COVID, Dr. Ponte is looking at you dead in the eye and saying, "Are you playing the D? You want to stay healthy? Play the D. Don't leave it up to vaccines. Play D.
Play D." And
you'll win a championship. No champion teams have ever won in any sport without playing the D.
That's right. I can't think of any. And hockey and football in particular.
Right.
Let me tell you.
D, Joe.
I mean, there's a reason why my main Twitter feed is called Stanley Cup OT, because
which is awesome, by the way, because you encapsulate the excitement of overtime. Seriously.
Oh,
it's the greatest part of sports is watching. Let me tell you something. I will leave a funeral and watch Stanley Cup OT, even if it's a loved one. I can't miss any of them.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, one of the greatest overtime games, I think you and I are gonna. You and I. All right, your top. Let's go there rather than top hockey players, because the answer is Wayne Gretzky. Okay.
Right.
I mean, it is. It's Wayne Gretzky. So, but no, I'm gonna go there. The best overtime Stanley Cup playoff overtime game that you've ever seen.
It was Mato.
Of course it is.
Maybe amongst the 5 greatest adrenaline rushes in my life for anything.
Yep.
And I tell everybody this, and I mean this, not joking, serious. The 5 great adrenaline rushes in my life, the ball going through Buckner's legs, and Mato. Those 2 gave me, and as I'm telling you, I'm getting goosebumps. This is how important sports is. I am getting goosebumps because those things just light up your life, and you could always access them. As a matter of fact, today's the anniversary of Marc Messier's 3 goals against the Devils in 1994.
Oh, the guarantee game.
And that gives me, so you ask me what you're talking about overtime, that Mato goal sent me into a 7th heaven.
It did for me too. It did for me too. And
the burden lift.
Well, first off, the story that Boomer Esiason shares is how the crowd went silent. They didn't see where the puck was. And it went from silent to this incredible roar. But, I mean, my favorite overtime games were, again, I saw this on tape delay. Because I was only 6 or 7 years old. But the Easter Epic. I know you're not an Islanders fan by any means, and neither am I. but the Easter Epic against the Capitals, that 4 overtime game.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 1987.
The 2005 overtime game, the Penguins and the Flyers is one of my all-time favorites.
It lasted like 3 weeks.
Well, here's the funny part. I was studying for a midterm that night. And I'm like, I want to take a break. So I decided, it's about 10:30. I decided to put on ESPN. And within about 2 minutes, Jágr hits the post in the first overtime. Okay. And now I'm like, I can't study. I can't study for this midterm. I gotta watch the rest of this game. They went until 3:00 in the freaking morning.
Right.
They went until 3:00 in the morning. Okay.
That's right. How many overtimes?
5.
Yeah.
5. With Keith Primo scoring 12:01 into the 5th overtime, Chris. Okay.
Right.
But it almost, let me tell you, that Tampa Bay game in 2020, I want to say did they play the Toronto Maple Leafs? It was just last season.
Yeah, for the Cup?
It was the first round game. It was the very first. Remember they were playing in the pods? They were playing in.
Right.
So,
right.
So they, and again, I forgot that they were playing. So when I turned on, it was already the 4th overtime. And they missed it. They missed it by, I believe, like 90 seconds. Okay. Braden Point scored the game winner. Yeah, it was just over 90 seconds. Braden Point scored the game winner at 10:27 of the 5th overtime. I'm sorry, it wasn't Toronto. My apologies. It was Columbus. It was the Blue Jackets.
Okay.
And Chris, that was a great hockey game. But you talk about defense. I mean, look, we've had 12 overtime games in the early going of these playoffs. 5 have been doubles.
Yeah, it's great.
1 triple. 1 triple last night.
I got all night. I want them to go longer and longer. You know why? Because my team's not in it, and I don't care. I don't care that people are losing weight watching these games because it's their team. But my feet are up, and there's nothing greater on television, I'm sorry, than overtime hockey. It's just, you cannot top it. You don't even have to root for a team. It's like it's better if it's not your team. You're going to enjoy it more.
That's right. So, Chris, we have talked about a great variety of topics tonight and today and now tonight. I want to thank you so much for being on the premiere episode of Joe's Place.
Thanks for having me,
and
Joe.
I thought that was a nice catchy name for, because it's so unoriginal, just calling it, your name and podcast. How many people have called it, the blah, blah, blah podcast? No, I want to come up with a catchy name. So I thought Joe's Place was a catchy name. And I had to make sure that Joe's Place wasn't taken. So when I saw it wasn't taken, I said, I'm going to take it.
Good.
So,
I think you're going to have you ask a lot of great questions, and naturally also you're a very good listener, and that's always a key.
Thank you.
And most people aren't, but you are. So I wish you a lot of luck with what you're doing, and I think you're going to have a great time with it.
Thank you, Chris. I greatly appreciate it. And we're going to be doing this every Tuesday and Saturday night. And Chris, I would definitely like to have you come on again very, very soon.
Sure.
Could be sooner than later because, as I said, with us talking about sports, we could talk about sports for 2 hours. I could have actually, with StreamYard, you could actually have a scroll on the screen with like sports updates and different topics. But while live, talking to a crowd, and again, I thank those who have been listening to episode 1 of the Joe Giannotti podcast, Joe's Place. Please tune in again. Saturday night will be episode 2. I'm trying to confirm a guest for Saturday night. But if not, one great thing is, as a kid, his name is J.P. Cheslowitz, who I mentor. And he has been, I actually did 9 episodes of a podcast called Overnights with the Zill back in September. And he was an outstanding co-host. He helped me out immensely. I think I've now nicknamed him McRib, because for somehow he was starting to compare high school sports to the McRib, on how this was during the heart of the pandemic, on how you can't have things all the time. So he was comparing high school sports to McRib, which was one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life.
That is pretty good.
And it was hilarious. Let me actually see. I don't think I have it, but I am going to post that on one of my future podcasts. He starts talking about McRib. And then I asked him, like, have you ever had the McRib? And he says, no. I'm like, then why are you even talking about the McRib? As a matter of fact, just a couple months ago, he ate for the first time. And again, because our good friends, I get to talk about this. He just had a Big Mac for the first time in his young adult life. And he goes, I'm not impressed. I'm like, of course you're not impressed. It's not that good. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's a good one.
Chris, thank you again. We'll be talking very soon. You have yourself a wonderful night. And for everyone, thank you again for watching the premiere episode of Joe's Place, the Joe Giannotti podcast. Have a great night now. Bye-bye.